Jamie Garvalia Consulting.
Hey, hey everybody, welcome back to Think Virtual Live. Looking forward to talking with Jamie about working virtually. I mean, many of us, if not all of us, are working remotely. It's now been 6 months, it's been crazy that it's been that long. And Jamie, your company specializes in really helping people virtually create the systems, the processes, the training manuals, the back end, the electronic digital versions. And right now, I think that's so important. I think companies are really seeing that it's a big gap that they have, and they don't have that foundation of fundamentals. And when you don't have the right people and you don't have the right systems and processes in place, a lot can go wrong. So I'm looking forward to talking about focusing on the right people today, which is the importance of recruiting. Because even if you have the best systems and processes and the wrong people, you can go in the wrong direction as a company. So let's talk, recruiting today. What are your thoughts on recruiting?
Yeah, so I think we're in a unique moment. Obviously all across the board. And first, technical difficulties this morning. We were supposed to be on at 9:30. It's now 10:30. So thanks everybody for tuning in. I'll be at a little bit
technical difficulty, not mine.
My technical difficulty.
For the record.
Admitted. Absolutely.
No, I'm kidding.
So I want to talk about recruiting because I think right now companies are in a moment where the unemployment is high, although it's dropping. I think that people are now looking at their pool of candidates in a different light because it's no longer just who you have locally and geographically. It's also people that you have all across the country. And I also think that some companies are thinking, well, I've been shut down for a little while, or I've just opened back up. I need to get that momentum before I think about hiring. And I'm challenging them to think about it in a different light. Now is the time. People are available. And it's, we have that saying, we've talked about it many times, John, always be recruiting.
Always.
And so the first thing is like have a recruiting plan and don't react. So if you're waiting until your team leaves you, then you're recruiting from a place of desperation rather than being proactive.
Yeah.
And right now is a moment where I feel like companies are in this special spot where they could be in that moment where they might be needing to recruit coming up in the next month, but they don't want to get themselves in that desperate moment. They want to start the process now and have the plan.
Right. I'm a big believer that plan should be 24/7, 365. There should always be a recruiting plan. You should always be recruiting because to find great takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
The greatest are people who don't even know that they want to move. And so the companies that recruit reactively always end up making a desperate, not always, but many times end up making a desperate hire just to fill the spot. If you're always recruiting and you're looking for the best, you don't have to. So now, let's talk about how we virtually recruit. What is this word? I know I have my 2 cents, but I want to hear yours. How do you virtually recruit?
Well, first you start to put out a really good and forward-thinking job description. People are being creative in their descriptions. They're putting it out on things like Indeed. LinkedIn is a huge resource right now, and getting out there. But I think one of the challenges of recruiting is that there's so many resumes coming in often. You're just inundated. So making sure that you have a system, and this is back to my systems always, but almost like a point system for your resumes so that you can easily say here's my criteria. Yeah. If I have multiple points I'm giving somebody for these criteria in their resume, and if they don't have this many points, they're out. And it's just a quick sift through all, you could get 150 resumes. Nobody's going to sit there and dive into every single one. Right. Have a system in place to kind of sift through and get those top level stacks that you have.
Yeah. The average person looks at a resume for 7 seconds. I mean, and so you need that quick jolt of, are there spelling errors? Is the first sentence applicable to, what you're looking for? What's the layout like? I mean, to me, the detail is a really big differentiator from someone who's really putting their best foot forward. It's no differently than people who call you and leave a horrible message. Like, that's supposed to be their best message ever. So to me, it disqualifies them immediately.
And I'm still a big believer in the cover letter. I mean, I think that it says something when somebody puts a little bit of extra effort into wanting your job and writing a cover letter. Or there's for those job seekers out there are so many different ways in which you can do a video cover letter or something really creative. Be creative right now on both ends. And I think we always have to keep innovating in order to make sure that we're seen as, if you're looking for a job, that you're seen and put at the top of the stack, but that as employers, you're still selling, there's options out there. There will be more and more options as the economy recovers from this. And so your company you need your company to be, you have to sell your company, I guess.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So what else should we be thinking should companies be thinking when it comes to recruiting virtually?
Well, this is interesting because I wanted to have this discussion with you, and I know you've given me so much great advice on both interviewing in the past, but also how I've interviewed people and my recruiting techniques. And I think that there's an interesting debate between personality tests. Pros and cons, I think I'm calling this, and I would love to hear what you think about the pros and cons. I know what I think about them.
I think I've taken every personality test in the world, and some of them you take and you think this doesn't even make any sense at all. A recent one that I took was the Colby, and it didn't even make any sense. And it basically came back and said, you should be a business coach, more or less. Yeah. I really like personality tests. I think they are great, but I think what people need to remember is they are only one indicator, meaning you really got to dig deep at the top 9 indicators, and the personality test is a 10th indicator. And I say that because sometimes you can have somebody score, whether it's Strength Finders, Colby, DISC. There's one that compares you to different animals. I mean, there's all these different types. But I've seen many where it says that people are amazing salespeople and they're not, because they can't make a phone call. I've seen people that say they have, they have great management skills. They would be a great manager, and everybody hates them. So I think you got to kind of take it with the person. I think the key is, and I interviewed a guy this morning, near Eyal, who wrote a book, Indistractable. And one of the things he talked about was people's inner triggers, right? Like, we all get distracted because of our inner triggers. It was a great interview. I did it this morning on a live. But what I mean by that is you got to ask questions to trigger people's triggers, to see how they react and what they do and what they can't do.
And you're so good at that, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
As an interviewer.
And I don't know if a personality test fully gets to the root of that element, right? So I like personality tests where if somebody takes it, then you can check questions to dig deeper into kind of those inner triggers, right? Yeah. Like, I gave somebody a personality test once. It came out great. And then at the interview, they said, I have no patience for, this was for a sales position. They scored great. He said, I have no patience for people. I just think all people are stupid if I have to tell them twice. Well, I said, the interview's over then, right? So I don't care how great you did on your personality test. So that's my take. What's your take, Jamie?
Well, I have a personal experience with it.
I've got to open up my door for my dog.
No, go for it. I have a personal experience with personality tests when I was a long time ago trying to get a job in sales. And the first indicator for the company was that they gave a 45-minute, really long test. It was probably like a sales/personality test with all these questions. And I did not, I obviously didn't do well on that test, and didn't even get, past that step in the interview process. And I'm an awesome salesperson, and I think that I would have been great at that job many years ago. So, but the point is that I think So my experience wasn't great initially in that specific situation. I just caution companies that if they're going to use a personality test as part of their weeding process, that they use it as a tool and not as an end result. And not, it can be a tool, but I would not cut somebody off because they didn't score a certain way. I would say take the information, and if you have two people at the very top that you love after you've interviewed them and talked to them, and this person did a little bit better, then maybe that helps you. But I would not cut people out because of them, because I think that it's often used as a weeder, and it shouldn't be.
Right.
That's my take.
If my career was based on just tests, when I was in kindergarten, I took a test that said what you were going to be for the rest of your life. I don't know if I ever told you this, but I took a personality test in kindergarten, not a personality test, a test in kindergarten, that the results came back and it said, you are qualified to be I wrote, I wanted to be a doctor or a lawyer. And it said, you are qualified to be a dock loader. And so I remember saying to my teacher, what is a dock loader? Like, I don't, and
I can 100% say you are not qualified to be a dock loader.
I am not. Right. And, if you look at just different types of tests, my ACTs, I think I got a 7. My SATs, I got a 720 total. Right. So tests to me, like, but it's about the nuances of questions. In my opinion, when you're recruiting, most people ask very generic questions, right? You got to get to the nitty gritty and into the DNA and the soul of someone when you're recruiting. You got to get them comfortably uncomfortable to get them to simulate a situation of what they would really be like in a real situation.
Yeah.
And see how they react in that moment. And,
absolutely.
And I do a lot of recruiting for my clients. I'll interview people. I do a ton of interviewing because they think I'm really good at interviewing, because I get to that element of it. And that's where a personality test cannot get to that.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's actually a perfect segue into the next thing that I said. Like, be prepared for your interviews. I have seen so many times that people just go in and softball. They just want to have a conversation. There's nothing wrong with having a conversation. That's an actual point that I want to make for employers as well. But having interview questions written out and giving the same questions to multiple candidates to see how they stack up against each other, you have to prepare. And there's behavioral and situational questions that I think are very relevant to people. What have they done in the past in a specific situation? Or if this situation comes up, how would they handle it? So think, you can even Google behavioral questions, situational questions, making sure that you have a bunch of questions that are relevant to the job at hand that you have prepared and are using consistently with all your interviewees, because it'll help keep the bar level and for you to see how people are thoughtful in their answers, and if they can pull things from their past, if they have ideas for the future, in a way that's just more than just softballing them these really super easy questions. So preparation.
I think you're huge in that. And when I go into interviews, I am intense and I am prepared.
So one of my thing was to ask you your favorite interview questions, because we've had multiple conversations. I've laughed at some of yours because you can be really intense. I mean, I'm glad that I don't have to be interviewed by you. I think I'm a little bit nicer in an interview than you, maybe.
No, I'm very nice.
Of course, you're nice.
I'm very nice during an interview.
What are your favorite questions?
I will tell you, but I take the interview process very seriously, because I expect people to show up and be their best, because if they're being interviewed, one of my favorite question is, on a scale from 1 to 10, how badly do you want to X? And it's amazing how many people will say, about a 6 or a 7. And so, to me, I just end the interview at that point and advise my clients to do the same, because if that person, by the time they show up, they've done research on the company, they have spent time driving, getting dressed, preparing, mentally preparing, and they sit down and they tell you, your company's about a 6 out of 10 of what I want to do. That's not the person I want.
Done.
And
Yeah.
so so a lot of times it's a good question to ask during a phone screen, and then again during the real element.
For sure. I've heard you say that one before.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing because I'll be with a client and then I'll give them that, and they'll say, I asked the person and they said an 8. I said, okay, well, that's what you're going to be getting. You're going to be getting it. Yeah, but they were so good with X, Y, and Z. But then you got to ask questions that dig into that number, and you got to keep on circling back, like knowing what you know now about the company, knowing about the culture, the environment. On a scale from 1 to 10, do you see yourself here? But because it's really important to ask measurable questions. Like, otherwise, it's just because you got to get into their psyche of what's happening.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I love the measurable. And you're not afraid to, and this is a good topic too. Like, we are all very busy and companies are very busy. You could be interviewing 10 people, 5 people for a certain position.
Right.
About wasting your time or not wasting your time. You're very, very good at saying this kind of interview, thank you, wrapping it up quickly when you know that it's a no-go. And, I think that some people feel like they have to be really nice through it. And I've been in both situations where I'm like, oh, I don't want to end it. They're going to know that I'm done with them. But the truth is, you don't want to waste their time. You don't want to waste your time. So if you know somebody's not a candidate, kindly wrap it up, even if it's 15 minutes in. And you always have something that you say to me is, and I'm a very early person in general. I don't come to things late, but if you're not 15 minutes early, you're late to an interview.
Correct. And to me, I think here's one of the things that drives me crazy about people who interview. They say, well, they know the interview went bad, and they say, well, we'll get back to you. And then most people are really bad at follow-up, and so they won't get back to the person. So then you leave this person hanging out there and stressed out and questioning everything. So I'm about being very direct and real. And so within the interview, I have no problem saying, based on these specific questions, I don't think you are a fit for the job, but I wish you all the best in everything that, you do. And as we close this interview, is there anything I can give you advice on or help you in any way?
Yeah. And these are some of the tips in your book that you wrote, right?
Correct.
And your ebook. You have a free ebook on this too, right? I
have an ebook and my book, which is also free on my website. But I, it's important. I mean, it's like, to me, we're not talking about letting people go, but letting people go is a very compassionate act and something that needs to be done in order to, keep everybody else safe in an organization and get rid of toxic people and allow someone to go do what they can experience their unique ability in.
Sure.
And same with recruiting. Sometimes I've interviewed people where they'll show up with dressed like a complete slob, and I'll ask them, why did you not wear a suit today, and why did you choose to wear that versus a suit? Did you? And because I want to know their decision-making process, because if I'm putting that person in front of a client, in front of anything that represents the company, I want to know their thought process. Well, I was running late this morning. Oh, okay, I understand that. Do you run late often? I do. I'm horrible with time management. All right, well then that's the end of the interview.
And when you're saying this, I'm thinking, who would absolutely say that in an interview? But people do. They really do reveal about themselves. And so if you get a red flag, so
I just want to say one thing.
Yeah.
I think the key with recruiting also, I think right now, virtually, you can recruit faster, you can recruit more. It's a lot easier to recruit right now because people are home, but never compromise, right? Mm-hmm. Do not compromise. You got to keep on looking. You got to look at your metrics and say, okay, I got to look at 1,000 resumes, talk to 50 people, and interview 25 to find one person.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and back to your question of how do you recruit online? You do virtual. I mean, I think you have to have a process. So do you have a phone interview first? Or first you get their resume, you weed out their resume. Then you do a quick phone interview. I think doing a phone interview for literally 5 minutes and saying, how does this person sound on the phone? Because if they cannot present themselves well over the phone, they're going to be the face of your company. You need them to sound professional. Right. And then once you do the phone interview, you get onto a Zoom call or some sort of video chat in order to get your gut. And I think people underestimate, like, my gut is one of the major deciding factors in any sort of interview. Even I think more than anything else, I trust my gut, and really, really important to make sure that you get a feeling. You either get a red flag or you get a green go, and you kind of know that really quickly. And then,
but just on that, right? You got to trust your gut, because you interview somebody 2, 3, 4 times. You trust your gut. They've got a resume. You still hope that person that you interviewed actually shows up, and then that person still has statistically a 50% chance of staying long term. Right. So recruiting is really hard. So when we look at just the science and the stats and the facts of turnover, average millennial stays at a job 3 to 4 years. All right, well, that means we got to always be recruiting, because there's always going to be turnover. That doesn't include the Gen Zs. And I just want to comment real quickly on your Zoom call. I think it's really important when you set that up, you say, okay, we're setting up a 10-minute Zoom call. You frame it and you time it. Otherwise, the obstacle people have with recruiting is they don't put measurables around it, right? Come in for a 20-minute interview. We're going to set up a 10-minute Zoom.
Yeah.
But, if you compound the wasted time of interviewing people that aren't going to be good for the job, following up with people you should have just told at the interview, and, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, you're looking at hundreds of hours a year.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, yeah.
And I think an interview needs to be tiered. So like you said, like the phone, for me, the even in the past, I've had, first we send out an email with 3 questions. If they don't respond to the email, then that's kind of a weeder right there. Then a quick 5-minute phone interview. I've had phone interviews that I've scheduled, and I call them and the people are sleeping. And they're like, oh God, I forgot. Okay, done. Like, you forgot about my phone interview? Done.
But that was the first problem. You always have them call you. You never call anybody. You have them call you, because that's how you test their time management skills.
Love that. See, that's awesome.
Right, their promptness, right. So if I'm setting up a phone interview, I'm not calling that person. I'm telling that person very specifically, and in a calendar invite, you call John.
Me. Love that.
Phone, right, in the calendar, because I'm not chasing anybody. If they're a minute late, I'm not even picking up the phone.
Right.
Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah.
And so just want to make sure that we're also, when you're virtually recruiting, once you kind of get to the point where you're having that, it's not in person, but a Zoom interview, that you're bringing in all the stakeholders. So if you have, you're maybe a COO level, but you're hiring and helping a manager hire for their department, you want to make sure that the manager, all the direct reports down to this person are there, so that everybody can have buy-in. You don't want to stick somebody in that hasn't been approved or acknowledged by anybody else on the team.
Yeah.
So that's that was another important tip, that don't forget who needs to have buy-in for this person.
Yeah.
And right now, I also think that this is not necessarily virtual. This is for everybody, but our budgets have been slashed in companies right now. Coronavirus has hit. And when you can be really creative to get great people without having to put out the high salaries at the very beginning. Have people earn their tiered promotions, and those can be structured at the time of offering. So just because you may have somebody that you're hiring for a manager position, and you really want this person, but you think that, oh, my budget just doesn't really afford them right now, start them at X and say, after 60 days or 30 days, I'm going to bump you, and then I'm going to bump you based on performance. And it should be measurable performance, but there are creative ways to get great people, and there are great people out there right now. And if you have people that are stale and stagnant in your business, it's time to level up. It's time to level up. There's a huge pool of people all throughout the country who are willing to work for you.
Absolutely. I want to comment on that as far as leveling up. Right now, every company in the country, in the world, is and or should be looking at their roster and saying, okay, here's my roster. Is everybody in the right seat? Right? The companies I'm coaching all around the country, is everybody in the right seat? If not, let's move them to the right seat. Let's determine what the job descriptions are that we have and what we need. And then let's go recruits, and then retain, and we retain by training. And so you gotta look at your roster and say, I want everybody, if you're gonna grow to be the best, you need the best people. And so sometimes companies need to put in a training program and train their people up, right? So it's not just fire everybody who isn't right. Look in the mirror and say, okay, am I investing in training my salespeople? Am I investing in training my managers, right? I mean, am I investing in training my leadership teams? Like, that's an investment, not an expense.
Yes.
And you can do that with the best virtual people all over the country in whatever area you need to grow. But I agree, recruiting should be every day. Retaining is top of the list, and training so you can keep them. And I agree with you, Jamie, level up.
Level up. That's awesome.
Yeah. Jamie, how can people get a hold of you?
You can email me at jamie@virtualadminconsultant.com, or my website is www.virtualadminconsultant.com. My phone number on there. I would love to, help any companies out there that need, something put together, a system and a structure to the recruiting. And Jon, like I said before, you have that books and resources all over your website. So hopefully people are going there and checking you out.
Yeah. Thanks, Jamie. Thanks.
Yeah.
We will do this again. When, in a week or two? I can't remember the exact date. I think 2 weeks.
In a couple weeks.
Yeah.
Sure.
Always fun doing Think Virtual Live with you. And
thanks. Sorry for the technical difficulties. I appreciate you shifting, adapting.
If you're not flexible and adaptable in this market, then you better be. So it's part of how it is. Appreciate all your insight. Great tips. I'm just going to leave everybody with one thing, which is you must have a plan and you must execute it on a daily basis. Thanks, Jamie. That was awesome. Good work.
Have a great day. Bye.
Everybody, thanks for listening.